cool. Okay, my name's Andy Wilton. I'm the Technical Director of Climax Studios New Zealand. Just a very quick rundown on who we are. Climax Studios are a very long-standing work-for-hire development studio, founded in 1988. We opened in New Zealand last year, and while that's a very remote location, it's actually quite well placed in time zones. We're roughly halfway in between Asia and the West Coast here, so very convenient for finding call times. I'd like to talk to you today. We are specialised in AR and VR development, and I'd like to talk to you today about an AR game that we released last year. It's a game called Towers. It was a launch title for the Lenovo Fab 2 Pro, which was the first and I believe is currently the only Tango device actually on the market to consumers. It's a tower building game. In terms of gameplay, it's very like the old Maxis Sim Tower. You add floors to a building, you furnish them, and little people come to live there. The difference being that it is an augmented reality game in the sense that it uses the device as a camera controller. If you want to look at the building in different ways, if you want to stand back and get an overview, if you want to move in close and really see the details of how the little people are living their lives, you simply move your device and you can control the view in a very intuitive and expressive way. People don't really need instructions on how to use it. A 3-year-old can do this, an 83-year-old can do this simply naturally by moving the device around. The movement and the parallax you get when you move gives you a strong sense that the building is actually physically present in front of you. It takes on the properties more of an elaborate toy or a doll's house or a museum piece rather than simply something displayed on the screen. It's hard to really get this across, but if I show you some game footage, that might help explain what I'm talking about. What we do find is that people, when they're faced with this, easily 90% of people, their reaction is simply to explore what we've shown them. Their focus is not really on the gameplay, it's on the building and the environment of the building. Here we see it being placed. This is simply the Tango device scanning for a good place to put the building down. And we find that people find the building fascinating as an object in its own right. This was an accidental discovery. We were going for simulation gameplay, but in fact, as you'll see, as you zoom in, the building becomes transparent and you can then see everything that's going on inside. I apologise for the shakiness, but obviously this is footage captured off a device. You don't perceive it as shaky in use because this is device movement that you're seeing. The UI is a kind of 2D, 3D hybrid here, where you actually tap on buildings to access certain features. Here we've just added a menswear store to the top floor here, and this one now we've managed to level the tower up and unlock some new building types by adding some hotel rooms there. And you can carry on in this way, adding floors to the tower, encouraging the little people to come in. This will then create problems in that the little people will get the place dirty, they'll raise fire hazards. Here, one of the lifts has broken down, so we're actually zooming in to see the lift that's causing the trouble. You can see the sparks coming out of the control panel, the doors aren't closing properly. So clearly what we need to do is to go to the recruitment office here and hire a technician. We need more technicians to go around and maintain the lifts, otherwise they will break down and the whole economy of the building will start to fail, which is very bad because you need the money in order to build more floors and unlock more features. Here we've gone to the bank just to check that we do in fact have enough money to pay the staff that we've hired. Very important to keep these things in balance, as I'm sure any developer will appreciate. And we carry on adding rooms in this way. What surprised us, as I say, is that in practice, the way people use it is more to go in and want to interact with things. Here we can see that you can change the TV channels simply by tapping on the TV screens. And in fact, this kind of non-gameplay related activity is something that people expected a lot more of. We saw a lot of people tapping on things, expecting them to do something. You'll see in a second that there are cats in the apartment, and while they do form part of the simulation, the security guards have to be tasked with feeding them. In fact, we found that people wanted to interact with them more. They wanted to be able to stroke them. They wanted to be able to feed them directly, we had accidentally created a kind of glorified doll's house. And the effect of this, I don't know if this really comes across from the footage, but the effect of this is very, very compelling, and people will spend 10 or 15 minutes simply looking at different aspects, going into the offices and looking at what's on the computer screens, this kind of thing. The potential for more exploratory gameplay like this is really quite considerable. Here we can see a cleaner going about his business. This oughtn't to be interesting, but it does in fact have some strange kind of fascination when you are moving the device and you can see that the cleaner is in fact, he feels physically present, even though it's just a simple low polygon model. So that is the game actually running. So what did we conclude from this? What did this change in our view of what AR is or can be? The first thing to say is that we were surprised by how important, how powerful handing camera control over to the user is. I should say, it has definite downsides in that there is nowhere to hide from the user. There is no way to put stuff behind the scenes in a way that the user can't see it, which does place certain demands on art, because normally you emphasize the things that are going to be close to the camera, and here you don't know where the camera is going to be. But in return for that, you get this amazingly expressive camera control in that users can really see what they want to see. What this does is, we liken it to multi-touch only for 3D. What multi-touch did in the early days of the App Store was it gave people a way to see what they wanted to in 2D and 2.5D games by scrolling with a finger, by doing pinch to zoom gestures. And everybody found this very, very intuitive, and this unlocked a whole world of what I would call microcosm games, where there is a map and there are little people, little creatures going about their business on the map, and you can then move around, zoom in on them, and then zoom back out to get an overview. And AR, using the device as a camera controller, gives you that only for 3D. It gives you that in environments that you couldn't represent in 2D and 2.5D. What is this going to mean in market terms when this becomes widely available, when people don't need a reasonably obscure device like the Fab 2 Pro to play this kind of game? We believe it's going to do two things. Firstly, it's going to disrupt some existing genres, what I call microcosm genres, like village building, tower defense, farming. A very strong example, I think, would be The Sims, the Electronic Arts game. The Sims, it attempts to present a doll's house. It lets you dress characters, decorate their environments, take an interest in their lives in quite a simulation kind of a way. To be able to turn them into objects, people that seem to be physically present, so that we can really experience them as if they were literally characters in a doll's house in front of us, this is going to be disruptive. If the incumbents in genres like that don't react to this and implement this kind of AR, what I call microcosm AR, my prediction is that there will be entrants that will make significant inroads into their market share. So anybody who's actually in charge of an IP like this probably ought to be reacting now. I think it will also spawn new genres. It should be said that this kind of AR gives quite a VR-like experience for people who otherwise could not, in fact, enjoy such an experience. I'm talking here about very young children. You can give this kind of game to a child who is too young to read, and they will still be able to see everything they want. They will be able to interact with a complicated 3D environment. This obviously suggests toy-like experiences such as dolls' houses, action figure play sets, train sets, slot car racing, anything where, as a child, you would tend to lower your head towards the floor to try and imagine yourself there. You no longer have to do that. The device will do that for you. And while it's certainly going to stimulate the imagination, this is something you can share. This is something that two of you can play together. This is something you can play remotely. This is something that you can take pictures of to show people later. So this has all the advantages of toy-like experiences except for the tactile element, but in return it gives you all the advantages of video games as well. So we expect this to spawn new genres, some pretty interesting products that straddle the boundary between virtual toys and video games. Now, at this point, we sometimes meet objections from people saying, well, this is all very well, but it's not really augmented reality. Now, to some extent, we view this as a question of wording, a question of how you define augmented reality. But there is a 10%, 15% school of thought that says that if you're not reacting to the context the user is in, then what you're doing is in some way not truly augmented reality. Now, this slide is a little provocative, perhaps deliberately so, but if we take the archetypal idea of an AR game as being zombies jumping out from behind a sofa, and apologies if that's a rather cliched example, if we take that example, then I would argue that the zombies are the fun bit there, and the sofa is actually a disposable part of the experience. Once you are in AR, you perceive virtual objects as being physically real in the same way that you perceive the actual concrete objects around you to be real. We don't need a sofa for zombies to jump out from behind. We can have them jump out from behind a pile of crates or a burnt out police cruiser, or, as I like to say, the half-eaten carcass of an escaped circus elephant. We can do anything we like because it's virtual. We can surely find something more interesting than a sofa to jump out from behind. To take this a little further, and without wanting to be unfair to sofas, they have other obvious problems. If you are wanting to play your AR game during your lunch break at the office, you're not going to be able to resume the level that you were playing because you don't have your sofa at the office. You cannot take your sofa around with you. In the same way, it's very difficult for you to share that context with other people. So that if you and I want to both play a level of a game, but we're not in the same space, if we're playing remotely, then it had better not be too context specific, or we're not going to be able to share that experience in a meaningful way. So my view is that while there is certainly a place for context-sensitive games, for location-specific games, there will still be a large market, the lion's share of the market, that will be for escapist games, games that don't care where you are, that can give you the same experience anywhere you can find a flat space to set them down, and that will provide that experience in a way that can be shared remotely. And this will all seem real because once you can move around and get parallax on an object, it appears to be there whether or not it is. That's kind of the whole point of AR. And this effect will be vastly magnified when we move to head-mounted displays. Mostly, though, I would argue that people should not get hung up on the definition of the term augmented reality. They should not get hung up on the idea of the philosophy of what augmented reality is, because they risk missing the short-term opportunity here. And that opportunity is ARKit. ARKit, I've been surprised by the number of people when I walk around that don't really know where ARKit is and what capabilities it has. For the purposes of what I've shown you, ARKit is largely capable of giving you this kind of microcosm AR experience pretty much anywhere under all reasonably good lighting conditions, on tabletops, on the floor. And it is capable of doing that on 300 million devices, give or take, that are in users' hands today. They can't do that yet unless they've downloaded the beta of iOS 11, but in the fall, Apple don't say exactly when, my guess is September, this will go live. There will be a before and an after, and suddenly 300 million people will be able to experience this kind of game if you can get it onto the App Store fast enough, if you can get it into their hands. This style of play is highly viral. When I demonstrate our games, are demos running on device. People come up to me and ask me, what is that? Can I download that on my phone? Right now the answer is no, and they go away intrigued but disappointed. In September the answer will be yes, you can. And my prediction, there are 80 to 90% rates of people see it, people want to play it, and people would move to the download step if they could. So you are going to have fantastic word of mouth, fantastic featuring opportunities. Apple are pushing ARKit very hard at the moment, and you can completely understand why. It's a technology that sets them apart from their competitors. Right now, the opportunity is mainly on iPhone because of the devices that will be capable of running ARKit, but we can expect the iPad base to transform itself very rapidly as people upgrade their devices to be able to run these kinds of experiences. And that is pretty much the opportunity. That is what we learned from Towers. And that's about it for me, I think.
Okay. Well, we've got time for one or two questions, if anyone's got a question. We haven't got a mic at the moment, but we have. So we'll start at the back.
First of all, I think this is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. Secondly, what's the scalability of it? You mentioned it's a sim tower. Could you make a block and a city?
Absolutely. It's really down to, I mean, our current demos of this are very much geared to the gameplay that I've shown you, but clearly the code base is capable of pretty much anything. It's really down to providing something that works ergonomically for the users. We learned a lot about what the users can actually do, and we would use the space much better now, but we were going with a design that was pretty much fixed, that didn't really, our schedule didn't really allow for us to adjust as we learned.
Great talk. I really like how you break down the AR definition versus what's actually fun, and the AR fun being the most important. When you're looking at users, you mentioned about, one thing you learned is that when they tap, they wanted something to happen. What was the most surprising thing that you learned from users watching them play? It looks very much like Tiny Towers, on mobile.
I think, I mean, Tiny Towers was certainly something we were thinking of while we were doing this, though Tiny Towers is more geared to a kind of freemium model where things happen in real time and you pay to skip cooldowns, which, I mean, our background is in freemium. We worked on big titles for Gameloft, stuff like My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and Ice Age Adventures. So we very much admired the way Tiny Towers did things. The surprising thing was that people were more interested in the sensation of physicality than they were in the idea that there was gameplay there. It was not that they were rejecting the gameplay, it was that they forgot to ask about it for 10 minutes or so. The initial reactions would be, wow, then the secondary reactions were kind of, what can I see? What's behind this paneling? This reaction was so strong that it had us asking ourselves questions like, have we got time to put stuff in the wardrobe so that when people fly the camera through the wardrobe they can see the contents? Have we got time to, the floors are solid there, they're solid concrete. Could we actually have floorboards? Could we have pipework? Could we have rats crawling around in there? There are really endless possibilities for putting details in that people will like, they will love. It was very much bringing people back to a childhood kind of experience of a doll's house and wanting to open cupboards to find out what's inside. That was the thing that really surprised us about people's reactions.
And very quickly, we can go one more, but very quickly.
So you've used Tango and ARKit. What are your opinions comparing the two?
Well, Tango is, we didn't manage to dig very deeply into ARKit. It is much, much better than you would expect a single camera solution to be, because they're doing this kind of virtual odometry thing. It is awesome technology. I really can't speak highly enough about it. And I should say I'm a big fan of Tango. Tango is excellent hardware, but what Apple managed to do with existing hardware, just through software, is amazing. I think when people have a chance, we've only had a few days to work with it. When people have a few weeks, a few months, they're going to manage to do things with the point cloud that are really going to astonish everybody. They're going to. I would urge anybody working in the AR sphere, if you haven't already got yourself a Mac, got yourself a device, and investigated this, please do. The opportunity is just huge.
Okay. Well, let's give Andy a big round of applause to say thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.